And we're back with a special edition episode of Ernestly Speaking with your host, Ernest Owens, myself. So, I did not actually plan to do this episode, but there has been a lot of virality um, pertaining to my thoughts around the Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico Senate Texas primary race. For those who listen to Ernestly Speaking on a regular basis, every week, right? Every Monday drops. You all know that I predicted this for months. And I feel like I'm going to take a break. And a lot of people know I was not going to do this special edition episode, but I did a thing in my head. I made my post. I said, if this post goes viral, you know, it might call for one because there might be an interest because I don't want to. This week is spring break. My students, they're off for spring break. And so, I don't have to be a professor for a week because I'm supposed to be writing my book, which I have. I've made some inroads for Divided We Stand. It's coming. And so this week was supposed to be me writing, and really doing my thing, which I have. So I'm not going to be hard on myself. We're making some really good inroads. I'm on the chapter about the squad. So, and also 2020 election, like the beginning of the 2020 election. So we're at that part of the book. Okay. So we're like 65, 70% done, but it's moving along, but it's fun. It's a fun chapter. But while I was writing that chapter and getting into the Justice Democrats and the Bernie Bros and really talking about that, there are some things that made me start thinking about what happened on Tuesday night in Texas. And a lot of people have been, saying, hey, nudging. And everyone knew I was like, I am writing the book. But I said, I'll give myself, an hour to unpack what happened, in my opinion. And I'm not going to have every single detail, but I have enough because I've been watching this. And those who have been following this show know that each week I was given updates about things I was hearing on the ground and some stuff that was sent to me. And I was following some things, some national stuff, but then also what was happening on the ground. There's a lot. There's a lot to uncover. And I think people want an explainer, right? That's not coming from, MS Now or CNN, right? You want something a little bit more frank. And yeah. And so one of the things that happened on Wednesday, the day after the election, is that I got over 20,000 followers on Instagram. And I told and that's what I do. I make these, I won't say impossible things, but it's like, if I reach 20,000 on Instagram, that's a sign I should do the episode. That happened. Then Zoran Mamdani followed me, mayor of New York City, followed me on Instagram on Wednesday, which is wild. Look, my own mayor don't even follow me in Philadelphia, so. But it's like, okay, let me gather, right? And then that's where my mind was. Let me gather, let me figure out how I want to talk about this. And yeah, so I did a post. I was watching the results on Tuesday. I did a little dry hint. Tuesday night, I did a little dry hint. I was like, I see there's some quiet, I said mighty quiet from you East Coast paid political influencers regarding these Senate primary poll numbers in Texas involving Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico. No final call yet, so I'll reserve my breakdown once they officially announce the outcome. But as someone who grew up in Texas, I can't wait to finally say what I've been wanting to say once the outside noise finally hush. So that's what I said on Tuesday night, because I had seen some things, heard some things. My family lives in Houston. They live in Harris County, and I got folks that live in Dallas. So it was a lot going on, and my brother and I were just talking about some of the stuff that was happening that we was hearing about at the polls. It's a lot. And I think people just wasn't getting it. So I shared a post once the results came, and this went viral. This is what I said. And I will actually get into all of this a lot more, but I want to read what I initially posted. The Texas primary results are in. James Talarico won, Jasmine Crockett lost. I knew this would happen because I grew up in Texas, but the social media algorithms and paid political content creators have allowed for political stand culture to drain out any common sense. So now, let me explain. For starters, it's not just racism and sexism that led to Crockett losing. She entered the race much later than Talarico, who made major inroads on the ground with voters before she switched gears to run. While Crockett was ensuring others dropped out for her to enter, Talarico was building momentum. Crockett ran a campaign that wasn't a good fit for a statewide Texas race. She garnered national appeal for fundraisers, but delayed on essential things like an updated campaign website that finally featured her platform until only a few weeks before the primary. Celebrity endorsements and a campaign that centered on her personal brand just wasn't going to move with Texas voters who wanted to know more about how she would transition from Congress to the Senate. Furthermore, diverse Texas voters I spoke to who personally liked Crockett felt like she wasn't taking the race as seriously until after they voted early. Some felt the Kamala Harris endorsement would have changed their mind if it was earlier, but they also felt she would be fine either way. I kept hearing people suggest she would land on MS Now or CNN if this didn't work out. In terms of Talarico, some voters felt social media narratives surrounding him were manufactured in ways that felt disingenuous or misleading. Some wanted Crockett to take the high road in not engaging in online drama that centered on issues that directly didn't impact Texas voters. For example, the CBS late night show interview mess with the FCC. And lastly, there was too much internal fighting within progressive and liberal voters regarding Crockett. While Talarico's more moderate and pragmatic base were consolidating behind him, Crockett's base were beginning to divide over her stances on Israel and other litmus tests that distracted from her overall platform. The very excited social media following that hyped her up would start to turn on her. So in closing, it would be easy and lazy to say that Texas voters weren't ready to elect a black woman to the Senate, but that would be disingenuous. The truth is that progressive Democrats got to learn how to be more mature and strategic about the way certain candidates must move in certain states in order to advance a more forward agenda. Every progressive can't be AOC and Mamdani because they don't live in NYC. You'll never elect anyone like Crockett in Texas if you hold them to East Coast progressive standards. You know, that's what I wrote. Now, another post that I did on Threads, which by the way, Threads is growing on me. I'm on Threads more than Twitter. Let's just start there. I haven't been on Twitter in a while. It's just, it's a cesspool. What a mess, right? Moral of the story, stop running Southern candidates on East Coast progressive political litmus tests and wondering why they lose. Jasmine Crockett is from Texas. A lot of her social media followers who turned on her lived in places where they assume everyone can run like Mamdani and AOC. This has to stop. Democrats can't continue to ignore the regional differences in this country. I grew up in Texas, and I know many of the Democrats there could never win in Philly and vice versa. If your only takeaway from the Texas Democratic primary is that Jasmine Crockett lost because Texas isn't ready to elect a black woman, that's an intellectually dishonest way of viewing all of this. She didn't get blowed out by Talarico. She actually put up a good fight, but she didn't put up a serious campaign that was longer, more prepared, and competitive for the uphill battle that required more focus. People forgot how late she came in the race and how others had to drop out. Okay, so that's what I put out publicly. A lot of people tried to be obtuse with that. A lot of people said all kinds of crazy things. A lot of people also agree with what I said. A lot of people added on to it. Now I get a chance because I know if I talked about this on my podcast episode, the episode would be extremely long, and you all know how it can get on the show. So I said, I'm going to do a special edition episode where I'm just going to talk about this because I think it deserves its own introspection. It reminds me kind of what I did with Mom Donnie in New York City, how that race went down. So sometimes I do give special editions about things happening. Look, I'm not going to unpack every single detail and thing because some stuff I think is irrelevant or don't matter as much. And we just need to be honest about what was happening and what you were seeing. Because some people are trying to understand, how did this happen? And what does this mean for the future, right? So let's get there. So for starters, I want to say before I go in, there is a lot of people that are ready to say voter suppression is why Jasmine Crockett lost. There was an incident with Paxton, who is in this runoff right now with James Corrin on the Republican side. He made some complaints about potential problems at the polls in Dallas and overrode a court decision to extend the voting hours in Dallas County. The Texas Supreme Court, which he is the AG, by the way, he's the Attorney General over there. So that's why some of this is biased, because he's in his incumbency as AG while also, playing around with what's going on in his own primary. It's very messy. This is Texas politics. He's the Texas Attorney General right now. So he's in this mess. In so many different ways. He has been in a current position where this is the stuff he's doing, right? And this is the shit, right? He was a member of the Texas Senate. He's been in some mess, right? And this is what it's giving. So this Texas Supreme Court entered in. They then stopped voting lines. They took some votes away. And what have you, and basically stopped at 7:00, even though they promised till 9. It's just been a shit show. And then they continued the voting, and then they said then Texas Supreme Court got in the middle of it and said, well, we won't count all the ballots before 7. We'll count that and everything else not. But they don't know how that is even going to work, because if you was in a line till 7, if you got in line by 7, your vote should count. But they have no way of separating that. I say all this to say that it is a legitimate problem. We should all be monitoring. The outcome, in general, of how this will play out, because they're already trying it in Democratic-friendly cities, right? And this could play out in the general election in November. And so this does spark a precursor of what could happen with other races in other cities. But everybody has to just be, vigilant, right? However, while that was a problem, and a serious problem, that was not going to change the outcome of this race. The race was not that close. He did not blow her out. Talarico did not blow her out. But if the way the numbers were, just being clear, that is Jasmine Crockett's base, okay? Let me also say this. I know she's from St. Louis, Missouri, y'all. I know. I'm talking about where she's from in terms of her district congressional seat. Her district congressional seat is in Texas. When I say she's from Texas, I don't mean was born and raised. But she's lived here for a long time, by the way. She went to law school. She been nestled in Texas for a minute. So as much as people want to say, oh, she's from Missouri, she was born there, we get it. I'm referring to where her elected seat is at, okay? It's in Texas. So I'm talking from the framework of Texas. I'm talking from the framework of her political base of supporters and where that is in her home turf. And then we'll get to outside noise. But I want to be clear about that. Here's what I know, and this is why I think she also conceded. Even if all those votes, first of all, you have to assume that all those votes was her votes in order for her to win. All those votes in Dallas County were not her votes. A great majority were, and that makes sense, but you can't assume all of Dallas was going for her. They weren't. She got a good deal. I think about 65%. I think when I was seeing some numbers, that's a good number, but 35% also was for Talarico at that point. Regardless, Dallas was not going to make or break the race, which is why eventually she did, she did concede. I don't think Dallas was going to be this nail biter like Florida was in like 2008, like not 2008, like 2000 and 2000. It's not like that. This was not that kind of election. There was strong margins, and we got to be real about it, right? I live in Harris County. I grew up in Harris County. I don't live in Harris County now. I live in Philly, but I grew up in Harris County. My first election was in 2010. I worked on a campaign for a woman who was running a Democrat, and I was 18. I volunteered. I canvassed, and I voted in my first primary in the spring of 2010 before I moved to Philly. And working the ground gave me an experience about Texas in a way that was very different. And this was in Harris County, Houston, okay? When I saw Jasmine Crockett have a low margin of win, she had the majority of votes in Harris County, but I was kind of like 8%. I was like, oh, that's when I knew. That's when I knew. Because in my mind, I feel like she was going to need to really, really turn up in Dallas, of course, and in Harris County. When I saw the number in Harris County not be as strong, both my husband and I were like, she only doing about 8%? Like it was just like, That's when I began to realize, yeah, something's up. What we got to be real about is that, one, a lot of people are just saying Talarico is this boring, dry, whatever. Let's not. That's such a very easy thing, right? Identity-wise, right? People get caught up in like aesthetics, right? They get caught up in the easy whitewashing, white writing of it all. Talarico's platform is not that very different from Jasmine Crockett's. They're not that polarizing different. And so when people are like, oh, they picked the boring white man, they spoke on some similar issues and topics. I think the problem is that there's a lot of things, but I want to say that to just write off Talarico as just some boring, mediocre white man, y'all need to look this man up. He's not. That's just not true. It's just not true. And I think people, again, when you're just judging things off of the surface, there was a lot of judgments made off the surface. That really is why people misread this election. And as a journalist and as somebody who really take the time to read and study and look up people and backgrounds and things, I just think people just casted this as this very charismatic, lively, smart, prepared Black woman against this dry, boring, non-prepared. They were both viable opponents. Both of them there's a case for both of them. I will never say Jasmine Crockett was not qualified. Absolutely, she was qualified. I think that Talarico was as well. They both represent a level of energy and promise that Texas voters had to figure it out on. And I think that there's a lot of things that played a role in it, but I think to just write people off a certain way, I just think is not accurate, okay? Talarico's platform and the way he spoke about class and the way that he talked about economic inequality, the way that he spoke about billionaires, he ran a very populist campaign that appealed to a lot of people. Um, it appealed to people in ways that, if you listen to what he was talking about, it echoed some of the similarities to Mondani. He didn't get into the social aspects, the social justice aspect, but when you talk about economic inequality and talked about those class issues when it pertains to the Texas politicians and the billionaires and wealth, it echoes some of that sentiment. But he did so in a way where, look, this man is also a reverend. This man also was a Texas state representative. He has a background. This man did not fall from the sky. He's not some random white guy that they just plucked and put in. He's not Beto at all either. Like, a lot of people did not take the time to really listen and follow. And I feel like it's so funny to me how people got real funny, because when he first ran his first campaign ad, I never forget when he was talking to a crowd of different people, I looked and I was like, who is this? I was like, this guy's interesting. This is different. This is different. I'm curious. I want to know more, because I felt like I was listening to what he was saying and I was captivated by the ad. I remember before Jasmine got in the race, a lot of people were gravitating towards him. Okay? And I saw some people that were sharing it. Certain social media, political influences were hyping it up and, being like, yo, pay attention. This guy look like he's a rising star. I remember the early narrative. Y'all remember it too, if you were honest. There were people being like, yo, who's this guy? This man is saying something different. And I was listening. He's went on certain podcasts that I was like, oh, he's going on Joe Rogan, who I don't care for. Y'all know Joe Rogan. Yeah, I don't like Joe Rogan. But he was on Joe Rogan. He was just doing some different things. And I was like, is giving Gavin Newsom, without as much cringe, okay? But there was just something about his whole vibe. And I was like, you know what? That's the kind of energy it's going to take for Texas to turn blue. That was before Jasmine. This is all my thoughts before Jasmine got in the race. And I talked about this on my podcast. Y'all remember how this went down. Again, was like, yo, this guy. So let me be very clear. I don't think this guy is a moderate. I think his base, the types of people he appealed to within the Democratic Party, he was pulling from different types of factions. What's also important to know is that when you look at his overall, he did really well with young voters. He did well with the Latino vote in ways that Jasmine Crockett could not. Jasmine Crockett got the black vote. A lot of black voters did vote for Jasmine Crockett across the board. But he got a wide pocket of people, younger voters, white voters, Latino voters, heavy. He got people from different pockets of the state. There were areas that even he surpassed support for Bernie Sanders. There were areas that would go high. He did areas, and I'm talking about primary votes. Like, there were areas where he turned out votes that people didn't expect. There is something happening in Texas, and he taps into different things, right? Watch the space. Watch that space. A lot of people were not paying attention to that. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, race. Yes, he's white. Yes, he's a white man. Yes, that may have played a role in how some people might have looked towards him. But this is the Democratic primary, okay? Everybody, I know people who voted for Talarico that were black. I got some friends who were Hispanic living in El Paso that was like, look, I was following Talarico from the beginning. Everybody who voted for him was not sexist, was not racist, was not believing a black woman. That wasn't the case. Because like I said before, the gap between Crockett and Talarico was not a blowout. I mean, it wasn't super close, But I think 46% of voters voted for her in the primary. She put up a good fight, as she should have. You see what I'm saying? Like I'm like, let's be clear. If it was just like a huge margin where people was playing in our face, no, people really did show up for Crockett. Like it wasn't like she didn't have a chance. So then the question becomes, well, then what played the role? And I just think we might be spending too much time just ready to write people off like they didn't want to give a black woman a chance. That's not true. And then there's people comparing her to like Kamala Harris and Stacey Abrams. That's just not what happened here. That's just not what happened in Texas, y'all. It's just not what happened. It's not. There are a lot of major errors that everyone is ignoring to create this story. Everybody wants a story. Everybody wants to make the takeaway narrative. Everybody wants to just divorce themselves from accountability. I am so tired of us doing that. We don't get better as a community, as a voter bloc, if we continue to not see the trees from the forest. If we continue to just, like, stop it. You did it with Kamala Harris. We got to stop. I'm ready to talk, okay? There were problems with Harris's campaign. One, some of the same issues that Jasmine had. She entered the race too late. She only had 107 days. That's not what Crockett had. That's what, probably Crockett had the same number of days. But Harris had 107 days. And people were not, there were already people concerned about some of her policies. Listen, compared to Trump, I feel like it should have just went to her, right? But also getting people enthusiastic about voting. Crockett had an uphill battle before she even declared because she decided to come into the race late. And she spent time talking other people to get out, like Colin Allred. And there were Texas voters I know that was not feeling that. They did not like it. They did not. They did not like the fact that, she decided. Look, I met her at Martha's Vineyard over the summer. It was in August. I met her for the first time. Lovely woman. Nice to meet her. She was very friendly. She was very polite. Took a picture with her. Cool. The conversations around her when I was at Martha's Vineyard, the political conversations, there was no talk about Senate. There were other conversations being had. I don't know if I'm going, well, I'll share it. People were like, president next couple of years. There was talks of president, which I thought was like, what? There was chatter in the vineyard about president. There are people that was acting like, you know what, she should, we need to start a pack and test her. That was the conversation. Why not president? Now, to me, I think that would have been a little too early. Clearly, Senate was that, but I didn't hear anything about the Senate when I was at the Vineyard. It was all a bunch of talk about president for her. And again, Talarico was, the person that everybody was like, who's this guy? It was just a very different conversation. That all I'm saying is that there was a lot of 180s. And then when there were talks about what she would do, she kept hinting, I'm going to make a final decision after Labor Day. So when I was there at the Vineyard, this is early first week of August, the blackest time in the Vineyard, there was still a question of whether she was going to do it or not do it. While she was figuring it out and negotiating and trying to wrangle folks to get out the race, Talarico was fundraising, building. And let's talk about the money. Oh my goodness, Talarico had a war chest. His ground game was set. While she was in the Vineyard trying to figure it out, Talarico's people was on the ground building, having town halls and conversations. Like, so much important time was wasted so she could roll out that red carpet to finally run. We cannot ignore that. We cannot act like they both started at the same place. For her to even do as well as she did tells me that maybe if she would have announced very early, she would have just made it clear from the get-go. I think, one, a lot of people would have never ran because they would have saw it for her. I mean, Talarico would have did his thing regardless. I think he would have probably stayed, right? But there would have just been more momentum, more focus. The donors and people that were supporting her, I will tell you that I saw in that room in the vineyard, was not having senatorial conversations. They were having presidential conversations. And they were having conversations about the next, 4 years. It was not about what was going to happen that year. That was just not the energy, y'all. And so all of a sudden, she decides to run, announce. And I'm like, damn. Well, I remember when Colin Allred lost and he just ended up winning a seat. He kept his seat. He's going to be fine. I remember when he dropped out, everyone was like, she was running. And there were people that were like, I don't know. It just was like too soon. And there was some bad blood with some Texas voters that kind of felt like they didn't like the fact that she entered it. They felt like she was getting greedy. Some people thought it was greedy. Some people was like, wait a minute, why can't you do another year in Congress? Let's spread the love. There were just people who felt like she felt entitled to the seat because of just her national presence. Listen, Jasmine Crockett is and was a rising star in the Democratic Party. Still is. I mean, she's not going to have an elected seat after January 2027, but the future is still wide for her. I don't think it's over. I just think there's going to have to just be a refocus, right? But it just all seemed very sudden. And I think a lot of people in Texas, especially Democrats, of course, were just like, why? Like, why? Like, if that's something you want to do, like, she knew what it took to get Congress. She didn't show up the same way for her congressional race the way she ran for her Senate race. It just felt rushed. And that's a big, and I think we need, everybody want to say all these other things, but we got to be honest about what we was dealing with. Even with Kamala, like, I think Kamala should have won, but we got to be honest about what it takes. Like, the rules don't just change. She did not have a primary. So she wasn't even tested amongst Democratic voters, right? Like, there are Democrats who felt like, listen, I'm going to vote blue no matter who, but that wasn't the who I wanted, right? There are people who really felt like, go to the convention, let's duke it out. But that also would have been divided, right? And I think the Democrats would have a united front. But there was a fakeness around the unity. Every Democrat was not fully united behind Kamala like they should have. If that was the case, she would have won. I mean, also, again, right, I would argue that racism and sexism played a role. But, like, again, there's also stuff that did not. I mean, here's the thing. If Obama can win in 2008, I'm not saying everybody can win, but I'm just saying that we cannot act like there has not been miracles and there has not been good things that have happened. Because when those things do happen, how do we explain them? Right? How do we explain Mamdani winning in New York? That New Yorkers in a city like New York will vote for a young millennial Muslim man. How do we explain that? Voters will vote if you give them something to vote for. If you show up a certain way, we can win. We can change things. But you have to work. And you got to have your shit together. And respectfully, lovingly, she did not have her shit together with this campaign. And I support black women. I'm a black queer man, of course. Of course. So let's not do that. Let's not do that over here. Let's not do that on this show. Because when other people were having those conversations, I saw what folks were doing. So quick to just to label folks. So quick to just tell people, oh, you know, you're this, you're that. It's like, come on. That's just such a very weak way to respond. There are some very smart black women that are on social media on threads. Shouts to Feminista Jones and others that are having the more nuanced conversations that people don't want to hear. People are not trying to hear them because it's uncomfortable. But we have this situation all the time. We don't read the room. We don't recognize other things. We just want to put out certain talking points. And I'm so tired of these goddamn chorus, political influencer, content creator folks. Can y'all please, let's talk about it. Can they just go away? Because they're the problem. Part of the problem. Part of the problem is that we have this political stand culture. I'm going to write about that in my book. I'm not going to go into it right now, but I want to get into it a little bit. I got to say a couple of things. Y'all, there are people who are paid, okay, by political think tank groups and operatives and campaigns, and they're paid to hype up people and promote certain campaigns and certain candidates, and they get on here and y'all follow them because y'all like their humor and you think they're funny and you like their little stuff and you think they know some shit, and y'all follow these people. But these people are chaos agents. They're creating socio-political chaos, y'all. They are chaos agents. They are people that are literally stirring up the pot. They're paid to start shit on the internet. They gas up stuff. They play its identity politics all up and down the wazoo. They try to bully folks. They think they can, but they don't. Because let me tell you something. When people go to the ballot in their privacy, they're going to vote how they want to vote. People will play the game on the internet. We see it all the time. Everybody will like things and share things and follow things and play the part online, but they'll go to that poll and vote a certain way. And so much of the political stand culture that we're in has created a world where people cannot have honest conversations out loud when it comes to these politics because they don't want to be shouted down. People are in echo chambers. The algorithm will only create and let people follow or things that support their beliefs, right? So if you follow black elected officials in Talarico and some of these people that are chorus paid and bought, right? You will live in a vacuum where you will think that Jasmine Crockett had way more leverage than she did. The social media algorithm is been manipulated. It's been because the same people that you follow for Kamala Harris are the same people that's now telling you what to think about Texas. But they don't even know. They don't live in Texas. They ain't got no family in Texas. They really don't know. Some of them do, but a lot of them are not being honest because they're getting paid to lie. They're getting paid to be petty. They're being paid to tell very half-assed, intellectually dishonest takes. They're bought. I don't need to name them. Don't worry. That's what we have a book for. But I'm telling you right now, y'all know who some of those people are. And you like them. And I get it. There's a couple of them in Philadelphia, no shade. I see what they're doing in local politics. I see where they're going to D.C. Pay attention to who's going to D.C. on a regular basis. Not from Philly. I'm just saying other folks. They're going to D.C. They're TikToking with these people. You know who I'm talking about. And they get up on there and they yell and they say the same shit. Everybody who don't like Jasmine Crockett, they yelling and heckling and hackling about, oh, this person racist and this is this and that. Okay. Everybody ain't racist. Or racist in that way, right? Just saying. They played a lot of the noise. And that's why I say, you know what? I know how this election is going to play out. I knew how it was going to play out. I just said, you know, I'm going to shut up and be quiet. When she loses, I will then enter the chat because then there'll be a space for me to be able to educate and provide more context because nobody wanted to hear it. Other people were trying to have those conversations, and I saw what was happening to them. I saw what was happening to them. And nobody wanted to hear it because everybody just wanted what they wanted, and there was no room to challenge or to ask. Jasmine Crockett did not have a fully edited, fully put together platform page on her campaign website until a few weeks before the primary. Like, did people look at the website? Y'all, she didn't even have her website fully together. Like, her actual campaign website was not even fully together with a actual thorough about platform page. Like, y'all, she was still working out the jinx of her actual platform like a few weeks before. Mind you, her opponent, Talarico, shit was shit was together. By the time the platform was like officially there, I was like, oh, okay. Not, her stuff was fine, you know? But like, again, this is the shit, man. This is the shit. This is the shit. So we're dealing with just major errors. And then there were conversations, right? She she gave up her congressional seat to her pastor who is in my fraternity. So we might have two brothers from Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated going to Congress in Texas. Al Green is in a runoff race with Christian Manfrey, who went to the same high school as me. Um, oh, don't even get me started on that race. I want Al Green to win, y'all. I do. Just one more term, but I get it. I understand both sides, but I really Al Green. I got my heart. Okay, I just want him to do one more. I mean, the guy is putting up a fight. You know, I know people are like, look, it's time for a new guard. I get it. I'm young too. I'll be 35 in October. I get it. I want some new blood, but sometimes the OGs just really be bringing it, yo. And I just feel like Al Green, he doing it. He's just doing it. Like, I mean, he's robust. He's energy. Like, give him one more term. One more term. Can he bow? Can he close out before 2028? Let him go through this entire Trump era and give Trump that hell. Let him do it for 2 more years, please, please. That's how I feel. I'm sorry, and I get it. Christian Manafree has run a good campaign. That runoff is going to be, we're going to have two black men either way. But let my alpha brother get one more term, please. One more term. We'll see. If Al Green loses, it won't be the end of the world. But come on, Texas. Give him one more term. But I digress. She gave up her seat to her pastor, who is most likely going to be a Congress. He's going to go to Congress. I mean, it's pretty much there, which is good. People were thinking for her to do something like this, people have had talks that she might consider other things. You know, she might be a media personality. She might be a figure for the Democratic Party. She might be one of those people that's going to move up. I mean, she's now a millionaire, a multimillionaire now, you know. She's rich. She's going to be fine, you know. But I think people were feeling like, hey, for her to run like that and to do this, like, it just seems very risky. It was a very risky move. It was a very risky move. It was very risky, in my opinion. So this brings me to the part of like, Talarico's running, strong race, all the things. right? A big reason why I think that she lost was not because of her own platform itself, which came rather later in the game, but because of what I call the East Coast political litmus test, the progressive one. I want to be very clear that I think people use identity and weaponize people's identity in ways that they hold them to standards that are double. Because Talarico is a white man that is Christian and he ran a platform on his Christian values, there were people who assumed that he was a centrist, moderate guy. Nah, no, that's not quite accurate. It's not. He's not Josh Shapiro, y'all. He's not Josh Shapiro. But because he's white, that's what y'all thought. And I get it. I get it because you weren't paying attention to the details. That's not what happened with him. Here's the issue with Jasmine Crockett. I think more people assumed Jasmine Crockett was more progressive than what she was. And I think it was based on her charisma and her personality. You all were thinking Cori Bush. Some people were. Not, well, Cori Bush might be extreme, not Cori Bush all the way, but I think people were assuming she was, because she's a Democrat, right? But she was like, I think people had assumptions that she was a likable liberal, a more liberal Democrat that spoke to that type of audience or could galvanize that type of audience. That just was not accurate. That wasn't who Jasmine Crockett was legislative-wise, right? If you look at her policies, they are left, but she wasn't that kind of leftist. But I think, again, regional politics have people assuming things that just was not there. And I think we see this in the conversations that happens later. Her stances on Israel had a lot of people being like, what? But to be honest, if you follow her, she's never been one of those, like she has spoken out against certain aspects of Israel, but she was never this strong, like, critic in the ways that I think people would have wanted her to be. She never had been. Yes, she's had her critiques, but I think there were people that was a little surprised. And there was interviews that she did, right, where people thought that she was going to speak harder. There has been this interesting movement within the Democratic, liberal, hyper-liberal, progressive leftist space that has been very like, we don't want AIPAC money, no AIPAC money. And she isn't AIPAC, I believe. She might have had some money, but she's not like an AIPAC person. I mean, I don't think so. I never received her as like this huge AIPAC person. But I think there were some people that felt like there was some monies. I mean, I don't know, right? I mean, compared to Talarico, I didn't see her as anything, you know, different from that, you know, but people really ran with that. And again, these were national supporters of hers, not Texas supporters. And I was like, why is this a thing? Like, why are we focused on AIPAC in this race with her? Like, why was this the case? She did not take AIPAC money, but there were conversations about how she discussed Israel in ways that people cringed, right? She talks about, look, there's been a long U.S. relationship between Israel and America, and there's that relationship is, you know, is long standing, and she just kind of, you know, she's not wrong. I mean, there has been a long standing relationship between the U.S. and Israel, but just because it's a long time relationship don't mean there can't be changes in that relationship or accountability. You know, we hear you, Jasmine. I get it, but like, are you gonna, you know? I don't think for me personally that was gonna be a deal breaker for me with her. For me, it was not. Especially given the fact that Talarico wasn't really saying anything that different on Israel either. But here's the difference though. While people were galvanizing national support and hype around Jasmine, no one's paying attention to local, right? The local hype was in Talarico's favor. He had a wider ground game. Jasmine had her supporters, but people weren't paying attention to those rallies, right? Jasmine Crockett was bringing out some huge crowds. She definitely was. But Talarico was too. And that was the part for me where I was like, wait a minute. He's bringing out crowds too. Like bigger crowds, if not the same. They were bar for bar, round for round. But Talarico was bringing out those crowds even before Jasmine Crockett entered the race. But nobody was talking about that. Your favorite political influencers and TikTokers and all them, they weren't showing y'all those crowds like that. Some were, but some people just weren't. They kept just showing Jasmine. So all you thought was that Jasmine was the only one bringing the heat. Talarico was too. But nobody was touching Talarico. So all this national talk about Talarico was all about, and I'll get to that in a minute, but like, if you pay attention, the left was eating its own with Jasmine because they started to pick on little things, stuff that I just didn't feel like was a big damn deal, to be honest. But people were running with it. And so there was attacks. Yes, she got attack ads. She got attack ads, okay? She did. But she also got attacks from people that initially supported her. Some of the people that supported her for Congress turned on her when she ran for the Senate. It was ugly. It was nasty. Like nasty. And I was kind of like, y'all, she did not change her positions when she ran for Senate. The same person that y'all liked for Congress was the same person y'all liked when she ran for Senate. She had not really changed, but people began to dig and pick, and context began to get blurry. And that was happening from people that was supposed to like her. So much of the national conversation shifted on her in those final 2 weeks. It was very nasty work. But that was her own base. So enthusiasm was also tethering in a way that the same people that hyped her up online was the same people that turned on her, and it got real nasty because she played so much up the national appeal. Well, if you play the national appeal, then the national appeal becomes the thing. And what was so fucked up about it was that, I'm going to be real with you. You want to talk about the racism, right? The racism wasn't so much that people were like, she wasn't electable because she was black. The racism was, in my opinion, was a lot of progressives feeling like and assuming that she is a black woman or a black candidate had to have a different political agenda than her white counterpart. And I'm not saying he's moderate, because he was not moderate. He had a lot of progressive ideas too. But the thing about Jasmine Crockett was that people wanted her, expected more from her. And I think some of it was because she was a black woman. I think that they expected her because she was playing it. And I think that was Jasmine's issue, was that she didn't really understand how to figure out what her platform was and who she was. And that while certain people were hyping her up to be one way, there was inconsistency. And she should have, I think, been firm on that a lot more. I think there was this 1-2 step dance where, in one sense, she liked the progressive left support she was getting online until she didn't. It was cool for her when she was standing up against Trump. I think people assume that because she was critical of Trump, that they thought that she had other ideas and other things. But two things can be true, right? She can be critical of Trump, but she can also have policies that were more aligned with the rest of the Democratic Party than Democratic Socialists or other progressives. People began to pick at certain bills and stuff. And I just felt like there was too much talk about Israel with her. I just felt like that just, I don't know. I don't know. I think there was just too much of that. And because of that, I think voters were like, even some people that supported her. And I just was like, why are we, I mean, if that's what you want, right? Because I don't think Talarico was saying anything any differently, but nobody was holding Talarico to that because Talarico wasn't running to that national attention that much. I mean, look, the ones he were running to were white men that were like Stephen Colbert, you know, also not just Stephen Colbert, but also Joe Rogan, who definitely was not running in that type of space. Crockett wasn't doing that. And I think even people that she did interview with, they began to show, they didn't turn on her per se, but they began to find problems with even some of her stances, and it showed. And so momentum and enthusiasm for her, I think, suffered, to be honest. I think it definitely did suffer. I think there were just certain things, right? I think people looked at her and probably wanted a Summer Lee. Summer Lee's in Pennsylvania, by the way. She's a congresswoman in Pennsylvania. She was backed by the Working Families Party. She is a Democrat, but she was the wonderful, brilliant young Black woman who spoke at the spoke a response for the State of the Union on behalf of the Working Families Party. And let's talk about that too, right? Because I've been a fan of Summer Lee forever. When she was a state rep, I kept saying, y'all, look it up. Ben Team Summer Lee. Summer Lee is what y'all think a lot of y'all faves are that are not. Summer Lee's about that life. And I think there were some people that thought that Jasmine Crockett was more of a Summer Lee. She's not. But that type of support that Jasmine Crockett was getting, she was getting all types of different people. There were the Stacey Abrams type of voters. There was the K Hive. She was getting, and when Kamala endorsed her, like the K Hivers have evolved into other types of groups, which is interesting. But the K Hive base, right? Let me tell you about that K Hive because I know who that K Hive is. The K Hive is not progressive, okay? They are very true blue Dems that want to see their true Dem centrist moderate people. They want to see them as Black folks, okay? They want to see Black Josh Shapiro's. They want to see Black moderate centrists. They want to, and that's how I consider them electable. They don't really want to go. They're not supporting the Summer Lees, ironically. They actually talk down on those types of Black women running. They don't like the Cori Bushes. They don't like. They're very respectability politics driven. They are very nasty. They don't really go up for the Mondanis. They don't go up for them. They actually are very antagonistic to progressive Dems that go against their true blue liberals in primaries. Okay? They keep moving the goalposts though. Jasmine Crockett is more of that ilk, not her personally, but her supporter base. So they fooled everybody because that base was pushing for her heavy. Those are what I call the chorus folks. They're the ones go, but they tiptoe though. They're really weird lately because then they get critical by AIPAC. It's really weird because they used to support, candidates that were backed by AIPAC. And then they kind of switched recently. It's really weird. They have an identity crisis right now. But then that identity crisis also impacts the way that they view her, right? They don't know. There's a weird thing happening with that coalition because they've moved the goalpost amongst themselves. Because I remember when Fetterman was running, they wanted Connor Lamb. Now, this is before Fetterman showed his ass. Okay? This is before Fetterman showed his ass. Let's be very clear. But I covered that race. And I told them, I said, Fetterman's going to win. They hated me because they wanted Connor Lamb. And I was like, you would think, right, that they would go for Malcolm Kenyatta. No, they wanted Connor Lamb. He was the quote unquote, electable guy. He's the one that's going to, that's who they wanted. That K-High, that kind of group, they were going for Connor Lamb in our PA politics. I said, no. Fetterman, who I was going for, because I thought Fetterman was the more broader, progressive, different, listen, we didn't think he was going to pull a 180 like this, right? So now they all want to be like, I told y'all Fetterman was this, that, and the third. But that wasn't, but y'all weren't going for Fetterman. Y'all were going for the Talarico type. Let me be quiet. We'll be quiet. It's just a very interesting identity crisis happening with them. They're very all over the place because I've seen them switch on who they back because they were not as critical of AIPAC. Now they kind of are. And I think that's also because of the turn of how other people are switching on AIPAC, right? But they were supporting Dems that were definitely law and order type Dems. They wanted Demings in Florida. They wanted other people in different races. Like if you look at who they were supporting other races, that tells you they were more aligned with Jasmine Crockett because they found her to be more of that ilk. Yeah, she had a little bit of progressive flair, but she was very much in lockstep and key with the rest of the Democratic establishment. Like she wasn't really that like swashbuckling in many ways. Interesting. But it's just I can listen, I'm gonna unpack more of that in my book. I don't want to get all into that right here, but I just want to say there was a lot of different switches that they don't want to talk about within their own coalition. But the switch up was real and the inconsistency was real with them. And that, I think, also did not help Jasmine because she started having these petty fights. The FCC conversation with Stephen Colbert and Talarico was I just wish she just did not waste her time on that, personally. Was not a real issue. It like, whether Colbert, whatever the case was, the show didn't air. Why do we care? And so many of those online influencers those content creators that was hyping that up, I was like, this is a distraction. There's bigger fish to fry. There was this desire to frame James Talarico as this racist, leaving out details of things he said, what were people said he said, all of this around Colin Alvarez. Like, here's the problem when you go down this route, right? This reminds me of the Democrats with the Bernie Sanders, right? And Hillary. They spend so much time tearing Hillary down. And then when Hillary loses, when she wins the primary, the Bernie bros are like, oh, they're all over the place around what they're going to do. This primary was just too damn nasty. It didn't have to get that nasty. I mean, yes, there was a PAC that supported James, but he wasn't a part of that PAC. Like, that's not, the PAC supported him. They ran negative ads against Jasmine. Everybody wants to expect that he needs to speak out against everything that's working in his favor. Jasmine wasn't doing that. She wasn't. They both could have did it. They're running against each other. Why are y'all expecting everybody to just kowtow? It's fucking politics. It was just weird to me how people wanted Talarico to do all this every single time someone says about Jasmine. Your supporters are doing. Are those his supporters, or are those people who just don't like her? Maybe they support him because they like him, but like, let's be clear, those are not people he's engaging. This reminds me of like, man, let me not even go there. Like, what about Jasmine? There were people that were making some very unfair, nasty things they said about Talarico. Did anybody ask Jasmine to apologize on behalf of her supporters for how they were acting that, like how they were coming after folks? No, he never did. Okay? There were blood on both sides. And in politics, you know, nobody ever asked the K-Hive for Kamala to tell the K-Hive, chill out on how they were out here doxing people and doing. But everybody was telling the Bernie bros too, as they should have. He had to always condemn violence, which he should, right? But no one was asking Kamala to say, hey, can you disavow how aggressive and how problematic the K-Hive was? Because the K-Hive was not just attacking white people, baby. Everybody was getting. They were fucking with me. I too was stung by the K-Hive, okay? But nobody was asking the K-Hive for her to condemn the K-Hive or what they were doing. So like, that's politics though. I get it, right? You take what support you can fucking get. But they whine. The same people that's attacking and doxing people on behalf of Jasmine Crockett are also the same people that want Talarico supporters or some of his people to not. Come on. You got to play fair. You got to fight fair. If y'all gonna throw hands, y'all can't expect people to throw hands. It got nasty. But they would whine. Everything was sexism. Everything was racism. Y'all just whine. Play the fight. Play fair. If you're gonna go, there was so many stupid attacks against James Talarico. Everybody was like, oh, he's a sexist. He doesn't support black. Like, what is this shit? Like, stop it. I don't think that Talarico was this blatant racist that was like, stop. Because now this man has the nomination. Now what are y'all gonna do? Y'all gonna switch up. So now are y'all gonna tell me that this man isn't this racist? I mean, the stuff that people were saying online, I was like, come on, y'all. I don't see that. Don't say that. Like, they just really ran with these narratives trying to paint this man like he was racist. It just was not true. It wasn't true. I was like, y'all are now acting like losers. If you want to critique, he really, as an individual, did not go there. He did not. He did not get low like that. He did not get low like that. And I think people saw that. People got tired. They were like, listen, if she's going to do it, if their team and her people are going to frame it like this, nobody's going, like, they're like, this is what's going to happen from now into, like, I just think that just was not a good look. It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. And then I think we got to be honest about the branding of the campaign. When I saw her first campaign video, I just felt like it would not have been the video I would have ran coming out top. I think she really leaned on her personal brand to drive her campaign. If it was a national campaign, like if she was running for president, I could see that. But Texas Texas voters are not really driven by personal brand campaigns, even for incumbents. They're driven by community, family, faith. There's a certain level of that shapes the way candidates appeal, right? It don't matter like that in Philadelphia, right? it don't really matter like that. I mean, Pennsylvania is very complex, right? But East Coast is very different. But in Texas specifically, you people want to see a more holistic candidate. Like people care about, are you married? What's your faith? How do those shape your values? It's just it matters more in Texas because it just these are people that still go to church, you know. Like I said, Philly's very different because I'm like, no one in Philly is really running like that. I mean, there are those who go to church and go and do all that, but they don't run like that here. But in Texas, like growing up, like that you would be listen, the candidate will show themselves praying. I mean, that's just how Democrats and Republicans. Okay, that's not like I just the campaign ads are hilarious. Like they're hilarious. Like these are ads you just have to watch them, y'all. Like I can't explain it. Like it's it's like you will see the person in the house cooking, in the church praying, at a football game. Like that's just they care about shit like that. They do. And I just feel like Jasmine, because I think this is also a thing, right? She didn't grow up in Texas. She's from Missouri. She's from St. Louis. I think some of those things show up in the way that she ran, right? Um, she doesn't like she had to run a statewide race. That's the first time she ran a statewide race. And I don't think she understood all of that. Like Dallas is a very liberal, different type of pocket, very urban. Like it's a different type of pocket, very black. It's just the way that she ran for her congressional seat could not be the way she runs for that statewide seat. And I think that was the problem. She ran the way that she ran for Congress is similar to the way that she ran statewide. And I think that was a major error for her. Yeah. So what's next? I think this is a time for us as a people, right, to really begin to learn from these errors. When I say we got to stop putting the progressive East Coast litmus test on candidates, what I mean is we got to recognize, not for her, it's not about her race, it's about how we view candidates. We need to really do real research. We cannot just have confirmation bias and just look at what we like in a person. Like, I think so much of her speaking against Trump, people just assumed her politics were going to be in the line of other, because a lot of Democratic moderates are not bucking at Trump in the ways that we are used to, or they're not really fighting against Trump like outwardly. And the ones that are the AOCs and the Mondanis. Like they're the ones speaking out, or the Gavin Newsoms in California. We don't see that many candidates, I mean moderates, or those who are more closer to the establishment. We don't see them doing it like that. And I think that's the confusion here, because Jasmine Crockett's politics are not that radical and not that progressive. But I think people assume that of her because she's speaking out so loud against Trump. And so I think people have projected a lot of things onto her that was not her. And she leaned into it because when the supporters were gassing up in the stands online, I think she didn't want to say no to some of that, but it showed. It showed up later and people felt a sense of betrayal. I don't think she betrayed them, because I think if you look at her records, they are very clear on who she is and how she votes. But people outside was not paying attention to that because they just wanted what they wanted. And they see black candidates and they expect certain things from them. And they have this fantasy, right? And a lot of people have been trying to fill the Obama gap, right? First it was Obama. So everybody who ran that was black and a black man, they wanted Obama. Like Wes Moore, they want Obama out of Wes Moore. Josh Shapiro talks like fucking Obama. Like what? Like Josh Shapiro I'm referring to. Like there is a sense that people want that. So any black woman who runs, they want Kamala. Some of these people want Kamala. Some of these people want, somebody on the other end, right? But they just don't know what they want. And they're projecting that. Like every black woman for the next couple of years is going to be compared to Kamala Harris. Every black man for many years running was compared to Obama. Like we just do that, and I just wish we would stop. I wish we would not conflate identity and race with politics. Unfortunately, that is a problem that we're seeing nationally. We also lack regional politics, that certain people have to run a certain way in order to win. And we don't recognize that you cannot have one umbrella, right? Certain identities, it's hard. There is a double standard. But also, we have to give a little bit more grace to recognize that the things that people need to do to win in certain areas are not going to be the same. Some people have taken APAC money. And hey, maybe that is what they felt like they had to do to win. But if you want to keep saying don't elect certain Democrats in areas where, okay, so what do you do, right? What do you do when you have a candidate that wins a primary that accepts APAC money, but is running against a Republican that is being supported by MAGA? What do you do? Some of y'all are saying vote third party. You're not going to win the House back with that shit. You're not going to win the Senate with that type of thinking. A lot of people are like using the APAC argument to take people out in primaries. Here's the thing. You will do that during the primary in certain cases. And then let me just say this. There was a base of Republicans that wanted Jasmine Crockett to win that race. Because they felt like, again, they could frame her as being more leftist than she really was. They wanted her. They wanted her to win. Trump is trying to end the runoff. He does not want Paxton and Cornyn, who are on the Republican nominees, to go into a runoff. He doesn't want it because he does not want the infighting amongst the Democrats. They don't want the fighting amongst the Democrats. They don't want the fighting amongst the Republicans. They don't want that infighting amongst Republicans to be split on him. Paxton and Cornyn. Cornyn is the incumbent. Trump is going to want Cornyn because Paxton is too polarizing. This is the Doug Mastriano situation in Pennsylvania, right? This is that type of situation where you get an extremist